Glass City go, Glass City go, Glass City go,
Glass City go, Glass City go. This is Toledo, an industrial city of approximately 1/2 million residents, located in northwest Ohio on the shores of Lake Erie. Viewers, prepare yourselves for a fascinating and chilling experience. We invite you to join us during the next hour as we visit several Toledo area cemeteries, which are reportedly haunted.
Toledo's haunted cemeteries.
Joy Cemetery was established in 1883 in what was then Sylvania Township, changing over to Adams Township, and is now the village of Ottawa Hills. It sits behind St. Michael's and the Hills Episcopal Church located on 4718 Brittany. Although the cemetery appears peaceful, one of its inhabitants definitely is not. The Great Lakes, notorious for their natural beauty, fishing, recreation, and islands, is perhaps equally notorious for their mysteries. Many a ship has fallen prey to their seemingly tranquil waters, only to be viciously swept up in a sudden squall and destroyed. Many a captain has courageously gone down with his ship, a sign of his undaunted love for the sea and his vessel. Could a captain's love of the sea lead to an eternity of unrest for his soul, compounded by the fact that his body was laid to rest in a cemetery, buried beneath the land, so far from the lakes that he loved? For one cemetery in Ottawa Hills, Ohio, it appears to be an all too disturbing reality for one Great Lakes captain. Late at night, one such captain has been known to creep around Benjamin Joy Cemetery in Ottawa Hills. He stalks the confines of the cemetery in his traditional sailing gear, limping around on his wooden leg. Unlike some souls who merely appear lost, confused, or perhaps in mourning, this soul is disturbed in a very frighteningly angry way. There are many possibilities when questioning the seemingly angry aura of this particular spirit. Was his body somehow separated from his ship after it met its fate? Did his loved ones refuse to respect his request to have his remains scattered as a final offering to the sea that he loved? His anger may even be directed towards the source of his missing leg. Perhaps for eternity, he will hear the call of the sea. Whatever the explanation for the spite of his specter, clearly he is not a soul you would want to come into contact in a cemetery in the middle of the night. He may never rest, forever searching, lost in the memory of standing behind the helm of his ship, steering toward the memory of the adventure that represented his life in this world and the tragedy that ended it. Until death do we part. The Blue Lady spoke these 3 words 3 times, and her biggest regret, the indecision of her family as to where she would finally rest when death finally came to her door. She married 3 times, and all 3 husbands preceded her in death. When it was her turn, her family could not decide which of her husbands to bury with her. Apparently, they made the wrong decision. The Blue Lady, devastated by the decision of her heirs, seems to be destined to roam, forever searching for her one true love. The lady and all 3 of her husbands were buried in Ravine Park Cemetery. The cemetery, established in 1883, is located in Sylvania, Ohio, on the south side of Ravine Drive between Main Street and Heroon. It is adjacent to St. Joseph's Catholic Cemetery. Unlike most area hauntings, or any haunting in general, this one has actually gained some interest from the media. As most reports of hauntings are automatically dismissed and thought to be myths, it is especially interesting that the Toledo Blade actually featured a story about this spirit. In October of 1999, under an eerie full moon, a Toledo Blade reporter followed an area paranormal investigator as he searched for the ghastly bride in the midnight hour. Christopher Tillman filled the reporter in on the legend behind the ghosts as they made their way through the cemetery. The story appeared in the Blade on October 30th, 1999. This was perhaps the most formal recognition the lady had ever received. On several occasions where a camera was actually found to function properly in the area, in most instances the photos end up revealing some very interesting anomalies. While orbs are common in a lot of investigations of a paranormal nature, they seem particularly predominant in photos taken in this location. Other photos show strange mists that have no plausible explanation. Without a doubt, the single most interesting photos taken of one of these mists was taken by Christopher Tillman on one of the investigations he conducted in the cemetery. The photo shows a very predominant, beautiful, bright blue mist. The fact that this photo contains something inexplicable is difficult to deny. A representative has examined the photo and negative, and his conclusion was that the photo was most likely not a processing error of any kind. This may very well be the best representation of the lady ever caught on film. This was not the first or last time someone has tried to capture evidence of the existence of this ghost. Those who search for evidence of paranormal phenomena usually use certain equipment to obtain readings of activity. Most commonly used equipment can be as simple as a tape recorder, a camera, or a video camera to capture both video and audio. This particular haunting is known to cause some interesting equipment failures. Cameras that will mysteriously work before entering the area and after leaving but not where the tombstone of the lady lies. Tape recorders that were previously normally functioning and with fresh batteries, refusing to record anything in the particular section of the cemetery. Video cameras have been known to do the same thing, work before and after, but not during a direct examination of the area. All of these occurrences can easily be explained as common equipment malfunctions, but perhaps the easy explanation is not always the correct one. Sometimes coincidences begin to add up to point to something beyond our realm of explanation. Although the existence of the lady is difficult to deny, we may never know the exact reason behind her inability to rest. It seems that in most cases, the spirits are lost and cannot find peace. The tragedy and oppressive sadness that surrounds this particular soul makes it even more mysterious. She seems to be searching for the one man she most loved, and perhaps may be searching forever. For whatever reason, her family never knew her true wishes or which man she loved the most. It may have been a secret to which no one will ever know the answer. The only thing we can be sure of is that she is unsettled and not at rest, and she continues to search Ravine Park Cemetery forever. The history of Wolfinger Cemetery can be traced back to the early 1700s. Jacob Wolfinger and his family were one of the first 3 families to settle in the area now known as the Secor Metro Park in Richfield Township. Jacob built the first log cabin in the area and also cleared the land to plant wheat and began an orchard. As Jacob settled into his new surroundings, he became a very well-respected and valuable member of the growing community. Jacob was elected as an official county trustee in April of 1840. Soon thereafter, Richfield Township built itself up around the new settlers and the land began to produce. Descendants of some of the first farmers in Richfield Township still farm the land there today. The actual Wolfinger property is now part of Secor Metro Park. Interestingly, a small section of Jacob's farm would become what is known today as the Wolfinger Cemetery. 2 of Jacob's children were the first white children born in Richfield Township and buried in the Wolfinger Cemetery, which at that point was only a small plot of land adjacent to Wolfinger's farm in which the children were buried. The cemetery still stands today at the edge of the woods in Secor Metro Park in Wolfinger Road and is shrouded with legends that have withstood the test of time. The legends surrounding the hauntings at Wolfinger Cemetery are all chillingly similar and all feature the spirits of small children. According to the legends, there is a family buried in the cemetery, a mother, a father, and their children, all buried at the edge of the cemetery that backs up to the woods. The dates of death on the markers of this family's grave are curiously close together. It seems that they all perished within the same general time period. It is said that the children play and dance around their graves late at night. Those who have not actually seen the children report that they have heard their haunting laughter. The most famous of the ghastly children roaming around Wolfinger seems to be a little girl. She has been described in many instances as being somewhere between the ages of 10 and 12. She appears in most instances clad in the traditional clothing that a little girl would wear in the late 1800s, donning her best pinafore with her hair done up in ringlets. What a shame that such a beautiful young lady seems to be in such a tragic state of unrest. Do these children even realize that they are dead? Are they destined to forever play within the confines of this dismal cemetery? Why are their precious young souls seemingly trapped between the worlds of life and death? One might also question why this family's lives devastatingly ended all within such a short span of time, and why it seems that only the souls of the children are not able to peacefully rest. The only thing that we can know for certain is that this historical cemetery, while small, continues to exist, and that for some children, this is the only playground they will ever know. Woodlawn is surrounded by a 2-mile iron fence. There are large iron gates at the cemetery's entrance, with 6 stone pillars at each side. Historic Woodlawn Cemetery, located in West Toledo, was founded in 1876. Measuring 160 acres, it is bordered on the north by Hillcrest Avenue, to the south by Central Avenue, to the east by Willys Park, and to the west by Jackman Road. With its 300 species of trees and 200 species of birds, as well as a lake, the cemetery offers a beautiful and tranquil setting for visitors. Frank Urich, Woodlawn's first superintendent from 1876 to 1900, was a horticulturist, and it was he who was responsible for providing the cemetery with an abundant collection of both domestic and foreign flora. During Woodlawn's early years, board members were attentive to the protection of birds as well. The administrative office building, constructed in 1903, is located inside the cemetery's main entrance. Its principal feature is a bell tower, and right up until the present day, the bell is tolled upon the arrival of a funeral procession. The Woodlawn Chapel, dedicated in 1883, was constructed atop a receiving vault where the bodies of those who had passed away during the wintertime were kept in storage. This was necessary because the technical capabilities to dig into frozen earth did not exist at that time. Woodlawn Cemetery is filled with fascinating sights and monuments, and even fairy circles. Throughout the years, historic Woodlawn Cemetery has been the source of reports about ghostly sightings, hauntings, and other legends. In 1991, Neubert's bus was stolen. Although it was later found by a man going through trash who returned it, the bus required repair work. A victim of one of history's greatest disasters is buried in Woodlawn Cemetery. A man who perished when the world-famous luxury liner Titanic sank on April 15, 1912, lies beneath the tombstone which you see here. Woodlawn Cemetery is the final resting place of many prominent individuals who were instrumental in the founding and development of the city of Toledo. Among them, the Spitzer, Snyder, Berdan, Stranahan, and Secor families are all represented by impressive mausoleums. Some inexplicable sounds have been reported to have been heard within the cemetery. Individuals have stated that they have heard what is described as demonic growlings coming from the bushes and the bridge near the water. In 1971, a lady reported that she heard a young girl crying near the greenhouse area. However, when this woman attempted to locate the child who was crying, she was unable to find anyone.
My name is Tony Harper. I am security at Woodlawn Cemetery. While closing the place, I observed a man and two children looking supposedly for his daughter. And she had been missing for 6 months. And I told him if, something had happened in a negative way that I would have known about it. Well, he asked for permission to look around the pond, which I gave him. And as I was talking to the gentleman, directly behind me, I heard someone laughing. And I turned around, and I couldn't see where the laughter was, or who was laughing. They laughed for about 2 minutes, I would imagine. And as I was trying to usher the gentleman away to go up to chase him off, I couldn't find anyone. And that was a strange incident here at Woodlawn that I had.
Also in the decade of the 1980s, a woman claimed that she saw large, bright white arcs of light moving between two buildings inside the cemetery. To this day, reports on sightings of a phantom girl continue. This girl is described as being in her teens, dressed in jeans and a shirt, with a sweatshirt tied around her waist. She is observed walking near the water. Historic Woodlawn Cemetery contains numerous mausoleums and monuments of varied styles and designs. The last of the cemetery's 42 mausoleums was constructed in the 1950s.
In the late 70s, my father was doing the usual routine drive-through to make certain everything was set before he closed the gates. And he noticed that someone had stuck an ace of spades up on this mausoleum. Now the ace of spades can be seen by some as the death card, but as Vietnam veterans know, it can also be a lucky card. So it's hard to say what the person who placed that card meant, but it did disturb my father enough that he removed it because he didn't want a family member to see it and be shaken or so back out here in the middle of nowhere where someone could maybe have been watching for him to see the message. So my father removed the card and made certain that he remembered where it was in case anything else did occur at this spot.
In 1923, the chapel vault was made into a crematorium. Thus, Woodlawn became the first cemetery in Northwest Ohio to offer cremation services. Exactly 50 years later, in 1973, a furnace malfunction in the crematorium resulted in a serious fire which caused damage to the chapel. The Bessie Ludwig Monument, standing just beyond the entrance gates, is quite unique and has a fascinating story on its origin. Her monument features an exact replica made from granite of the easy chair in which she spent the final 25 years of her life. Following the death of her husband, a successful oil businessman named Leroy McIntyre Ludwig, Bessie reportedly slept sitting in her chair because she was apprehensive that if she lay down, she would not get up again. When she died in 1930, her chair was sent by relatives to a quarry in Vermont to be certain that an exact replica of this chair would be carved. Upon completion of the granite duplication, the chair was transported by train to Toledo, where it was then transferred onto a special car which took it down the Central Avenue trolley line. Tracks laid it to Woodlawn enabled the monument to make its final journey to where it stands today. Over the years, many people have claimed to have seen a ghostly figure sitting in the chair after dark. Is this the ghost of Bessie Ludwig? Does she still sit in her beloved chair even after death? Psychics who have visited the cemetery have reported abnormal feelings. Some electronic voice phenomena, recorded voices of the dead, have been successfully captured on tape as well. Numerous unexplained sightings have taken place over many years in Woodlawn Cemetery. During the 1970s, reports persisted about sightings of what became known as the Phantom Lady in White. It was said that she wore a long white gown and was observed gliding through the cemetery. A man who resides on Almeda Drive claims that he sees shadow people walking through the fences of Woodlawn Cemetery at night and then disappearing. Upon being developed, photographs of several crypts in Woodlawn reveal unusual objects, shapes, and even skull-like images. The Lucas County Civil War Monument was dedicated on May 25, 1901. Soaring 65 feet in height and weighing 32,000 pounds, it is made of granite in a Grecian needle design. The memorial is surrounded by 295 graves of area veterans, which are arranged in the shape of a 5-point star, which was the symbol of the Grand Army of the Republic. Several Civil War officers are also buried in Woodlawn, including Colonel Henry G. Neubert, who was involved in General Sherman's March to the Sea in 1864. Neubert's memorial has a bronze bust with a stone bench on each side of it. On the pedestal is a bronze relief which Neubert designed himself. It depicts him on horseback with Sherman as they both look toward Savannah, Georgia, which was the destination of the march. In 1983, a man reported that he observed what he believed to be the ghost of a British soldier from the Revolutionary War period. Research carried out with metal detectors in the area discovered artifacts from the War of 1812, including buttons belonging to the coat of British troops.
Back in about 1985, my husband and a friend and I were walking through the backwoods in the back part of the cemetery. The area's got landfill, of course, from the fact that when there's a grave dug, there's leftover earth. But there's also wild plants back there, such as a certain compass plant that is very interesting because of the way its leaves follow the sun. My husband and my friend and I were walking back through the woods there, and we heard something rustling off in the fallen leaves. It was a hot summer, so there were quite a few dry leaves on the ground. And we saw what looked like a medium-sized dog, but it wasn't a dog. It was a black rabbit that stood, up to at least my hip, so probably about 3 feet. This thing was huge. We sort of nicknamed it the Vorpal Bunny, Vorpal meaning an animal that cannot be destroyed, and is a harbinger of evil things. We just didn't understand how this huge rabbit was running around back there in the woods. It was close, however, to the back part of the cemetery across Hillcrest, where there is purported to have been a witch that once lived. Some say that maybe this was her spirit that was still haunting around the area. The building she lived in was one of the oldest brick houses in the city of Toledo, and she was purported to have been a bit powerful. So it's possible that this huge, unnatural black rabbit that we saw that summer was somehow related to her. There's also supposed to be a ghost of a lady in a white dress that runs along Hillcrest Road. I never saw her, but I have heard stories of her. Apparently she's dark-haired and runs from where, I'm not certain, but she wears a flowing white dress and has been seen by a few in the past years.
My brother-in-law, Paul, said we were riding bikes and we lost him. He was gone for 3 hours. We looked all over. We did not know where he was. So he came back 3 hours later, and it took him 3 hours to tell us because he was in such shock. He told us he was on the back road riding his bike by the pyramid, and he was riding his bike, and then this force stopped him, and his feet were still on the pedals, and he looks, and there's like a ghostly girl under the tree, and she's getting raped, and she said, "Get off of me, get off of me," and then he claims that this force just like kind of dropped him and he caught himself, and that was it.
The monument to John Gunkel, the founder of the Toledo Newsboys Association, weighs 1,000 tons and stands 26 feet in height. It is made of 10,000 small stones and rocks from several nations, such as agates from the Middle East and scarce stones from Japan, China, and Alaska, which were donated by citizens of Toledo.
Back in about 1984, on a Palm Sunday, I was driving along this road, and I noticed a dead animal right about here. I noticed something strange about this animal, though. It didn't have a head. I took a look at it, I got out of the vehicle, and there were also no flies attracted to this creature. It was a rabbit, but there was no head. It was laying in an east-west position across this watercourse, and I had a funny feeling about it. I wasn't quite certain what was going on, but I didn't like the feeling. I left it there, but I reported it to my father, who was general manager at the time. We never really found the head, but there was an arborvitae bush over this way, and the rabbit was laying here. And as far as I could tell, it never did corrupt. I tried to watch the area, and there was some occult activity that transpired over the next few weeks. A friend of mine who was related to some of the occult groups in the area said that he talked to a young lady, and she was pretty scared. She said that her group had tried something in here. They tried to summon what they called a spirit or an angel, but the problem was they got what they call an opposite number. In the realms of heaven and hell, there's supposed to be a demon for every angel. If you get the opposite number, you get the antithesis of what you're trying to attract. Consequently, when I was walking along this road, walking my dog a few weeks later, and something growled at me and I didn't see anything, I decided I would press the matter with my friend. Several nights later, he, myself, my husband, and a few other friends came through here. We had a tape recorder running, and he said to basically the air, this device can record anything you want us to hear. Well, it recorded the sound of wind where there was none, and it recorded a few voices, one saying the name Mark, which meant nothing to any of us. But later on, my friend decided, well, we better sort of send back whatever has come through because it doesn't belong here, especially if it's starting to growl at people. So he did some type of ceremony which I was not part of, and that did seem to lay the spirit of whatever it was that had come through by the dabblings of those that didn't really know what they were doing. Back in 1972, when I was first living in this house, my sister remembers hearing someone crying one night and asked me about it the next morning, but it wasn't me. She lives in the bedroom in the upstairs area. I was downstairs sort of below her room, but we don't know what the crying sound was, but it sounded like someone just, their heart breaking from what my sister said. Back in about 1985 or so, my husband and I were still dating, although we were engaged. We were just waiting for a few years first till I finished college. He was walking from the house to his car, where he parked to stay out of the way of traffic, and he suddenly realized he was standing sort of in the middle of someone. He could tell it was a British ghost, not an officer, but more like a sergeant of the 41st Regiment Light Artillery, Light Infantry, and he could even see the style of what's termed lace on the man's coat, which is bastion style. He also smelled beer. So since my husband is a military officer in the U.S. Army, he dressed this ghost down for being drunk on duty. That may actually have been what led to his demise, as the War of 1812 did go soundly through this area. There was a time when they were cutting a trench for a phone line to the main house that used to stand on these grounds. And at that point in time, we were looking in the dirt. Just a simple thing to do. We found script eye buttons, which would be the U.S. infantry. We found coinage from the time period. And the most telling thing was, behind the main house, we found a British shako plate. This is shaped like a bugle horn, and it was tinned, silvered a bit, and when we looked at it under a magnifying glass, it was identical to one that my husband had on his own shako for doing living history. It was produced off of the exact same mold. Consequently, we know that the American forces and the British forces met up here at this point in time in 1812. There was even at one point a time when we were able to do a little archaeology. It's not a burial area that we were checking through with a metal detector. It was an area simply that's always been residence because the house was here before the cemetery was. We discovered small bits of lead, and we couldn't figure it out. The weight was right for a 50 caliber musket ball, but they were deformed as if by being melted. We also discovered some charred wood, and we discovered the shako plates in a bag that would have been distributed to the American forces of this area. It's historic that the American forces of this area never received those shako plates. I think we now know why. The American forces were camped around here. They were in perhaps a small cabin not too far behind us, and some of the British scouts discovered them. There may have been a firefight. We even discovered a metal bowl that had a hole blasted through the bottom of it. And we figured that, well, the shako plates were never distributed because the men who were to distribute them were caught up in that firefight. You drop anything non-essential when you're in a firefight, you don't really go back for it. So we believe that the British forces perhaps had the American forces on the run in this area, which is not too far off of Detroit Avenue, which was also thought of as Hull's Trail. So we had the British ghost, who was a sentry, a little drunk on duty. We had the Americans losing the shako plates that were to have been distributed to this area. And all of this right here in the backyard of Toledo. Back, I'd say, in about 1988, I was walking along towards my brother's house from the main house here. And as I was walking past the walnut tree that's there, butternut walnut, I suddenly saw this white arc of light flash between the two houses. Now, some might attribute it to an energy source of something called a ley line. I believe that Woodlawn does have energy areas, perhaps not a vortex like there have been opening up in this area, but Woodlawn definitely has an energy. It's 160 acres, and it was pristine farmland. The house that used to be here was here before the cemetery. And there's just a beauty about this place that may be echoed by the ley line I saw flashing between the two houses, just an affirmation that this place is special.
Woodlawn Cemetery has been and is yet rumored to be the location used for secretive occult ceremonies. One lady stated that the Ace of Spades card was affixed to the doorway of crypts. In the occult, the Ace of Spades signifies and foreshadows death. Rituals of satanic worship also have been reported to have taken place in Woodlawn. Cemetery workers have discovered occult symbols painted on monuments. Decapitated animals and animal bones, apparently used during ritual sacrifices, also have been found. As far back as 50 years ago, gypsies held seances in the cemetery at night to communicate with their dead.
Filming at Woodlawn is really, for me, broken down into two different places. Woodlawn during the day, Woodlawn at night. Woodlawn during the day was very peaceful, very tranquil, very scenic. Nobody had any bad vibes or bad experiences whatsoever. Filming at night at Woodlawn, however, was a different story. Three of us had different experiences there. Patrick, one of the cameramen, one of the members of the crew, remember seeing red eyes. I remember he slammed on his brakes. I didn't see it at the time, but I saw the fright in his eyes. Nathan, another cameraman, another member of the crew, also said off by the southeastern side, he heard a girl crying. Walked around for a little while, couldn't find anybody. Also on that same side, on the southeastern side, we were taking pictures of monuments and gravestones. Three of us were. I turned around and looked the other way, I saw a man with a white shirt, black pants, and I remember seeing a gold belt walking straight at us. I remember seeing the arms swinging. The moment I saw him, the instant I saw him, he disappeared. Pat and Nate, who were with me at the time, were both looking the other way and didn't see it. Now later that night, we were speaking to some people outside the cemetery who were wondering what we were doing, told them about our project. Before I had mentioned to them what I saw, they told me there's a story you gotta know. A lot of people that live around here see a man walking through the cemetery wearing a white shirt, black pants. They have called the police on him many times, different people that live around there, and whenever the police get there, nobody's in the cemetery. I guess the police now have even taken it sort of with a grain of salt and don't even show up anymore. So out of all the cemeteries we filmed at, Woodlawn was by far the most fascinating. For many reasons, the history, the history of sightings and hauntings, the legends. It's very rich in all of that.
Woodlawn Cemetery certainly is historic, but we must ask ourselves, is it also haunted? You be the judge.